It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that makes you forget the world has sharp edges. Mist hung low over Lake Morrison, and the air smelled of pine and coffee. I stood on my dock, mug in hand, watching sunlight crawl across the ripples. For a moment, everything was exactly as it should be, until the ground began to tremble. A deep mechanical growl rolled through the fog. At first I thought it was a passing truck. Then I saw them, two yellow bulldozers crawling out of the haze like monsters from a bad dream. Behind them followed a convoy of contractors wearing reflective vests and smug expressions. And leading the parade, perched in a spotless white BMW, was the queen of the HOA herself, Linda Prescott. My heart dropped. As the bulldozers rumbled toward the old stone bridge, the one my great-grandfather built with his bare hands in 1923. That bridge wasn't just a pile of limestone and mortar. It was family history. He'd carved each block himself, connecting our side of the lake to the main road long before luxury communities and architectural review boards existed. For 100 years, it stood strong through floods, droughts, and generations of Morrison hands fishing off its edge. I sprinted down the gravel path, shouting over the engines, but they didn't even pause. The first crunch of metal against stone echoed across the water, followed by the sickening crack of century-old craftsmanship giving way. Dust rose into the air like a funeral plume. Linda stepped out of her car, pearls glinting in the morning light, arms crossed as if she were supervising a landscaping project, not erasing a legacy. "Excuse me." "That bridge is on my property," I yelled. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Community standards, Mr. Morrison, it's an eyesore. Progress waits for no one?" The bulldozer pushed again. Another crack. Another piece of history gone. I stood frozen, powerless, coffee cooling in my hand as the bridge collapsed into the lake with a splash that echoed like thunder. That was the moment I stopped being a homeowner and became something else entirely, a man with nothing left to lose and the knowledge of exactly how to fight back. They took my bridge that morning. By the time I was done, I'd take their lake. That bridge wasn't just stone and mortar. It was the backbone of my family's history. My great-grandfather, Samuel Morrison, built it after returning from the Great War. He didn't have fancy equipment or an engineering degree. Just calloused hands, a sharp mind, and a promise to connect this small lakeside community. He cut the limestone himself from the quarry a mile east, hauled it with mules, and laid each block like it was part of his soul. My grandfather used to say that bridge wasn't just a road, it was a bond. Neighbors crossed it to share food during the Depression. Kids fished off it every summer, and couples carved their initials into the railings during high school dates. My father proposed to my mother standing right in the middle of it, while the sunset turned the lake into gold. That bridge carried more than cars. It carried memories, laughter, and legacy. When I inherited the property 3 months ago, I saw it as more than land. It was a chapter I was responsible for continuing. My wife Sarah and I had plans. Fix up the old cabin, maybe retire early. I'd start a small consultancy from home and spend mornings watching the fog lift off the lake while sipping coffee. From the same dock where my grandfather taught me to fish, but the world around the lake had changed. The other side, once open ranchland, was now a cluster of high-end homes with names like Whispering Pines and Silver Oaks Estate. And at the center of that polished new world sat their leader, Linda Prescott, a woman who measured worth in square footage and status symbols. To her, my bridge wasn't history. It was a blemish, something old and imperfect standing in the way of her vision of perfection. But to me, it was the one thing holding this place together. She didn't just demolish stone that morning. She cracked open a century of Morrison legacy. And she had no idea she'd just started a war she couldn't possibly win. You can always tell what kind of person runs an HOA by the way they smile while delivering bad news. Linda Prescott's smile could curdle milk. She'd only been in Whispering Pines for 2 years, but in that short time, she'd managed to crown herself queen. A former real estate agent from Dallas, Linda had a talent for 2 things: manipulation and meetings. Her idea of community improvement was banning fishing nets, repainting mailboxes, and charging fines for grass that dared to grow an inch too high. I met her officially for the first time at an HOA gathering in their polished community center. Everything about her screamed money that had never seen mud. Designer pearls, manicured nails, perfume strong enough to make your eyes water. She approached me like she was about to sell me something I already owned. Mr. Morrison, she began, flashing that practiced grin. We're so glad you've joined our little community. But we do need to discuss that structure of yours, the bridge, I asked, already knowing where this was going. She tilted her head like a teacher explaining colors to a child. Yes, the bridge. It doesn't align with our architectural guidelines. It's technically a violation under Covenant 47B, I laughed. Ma'am, that bridge has been here since 1923. Your covenant didn't exist until, 2010? Her smile didn't falter. Progress requires adjustment. I'm sure you'll understand. Then she slid a letter across the table, official HOA stationery, complete with the threat of 500 a day fines if I didn't remove the non-compliant structure within 30 days. That was the first time I realized what she really wanted. Not compliance, not safety, control. To her, I wasn't a neighbor. I was a blemish on her perfect postcard community. A reminder that this place used to belong to working people before luxury developers carved it up and stamped it with exclusive access. When I got home, Sarah found me sitting at the table, the letter spread out like a bad omen. She said softly, "She doesn't know who she's messing with." I smiled, but there was no humor left in it. "No," I said, folding the letter carefully. "She doesn't, but she's about to find out. When someone threatens you with fines, you can get angry, or you can get smart. And lucky for me, I'm an engineer. Getting smart is what I do." That night, after Sarah went to bed, I climbed up to my grandfather's old attic. The air was thick with dust and memories, old fishing rods, a rusted lantern, boxes labeled Sam's papers. I opened one and found what I was looking for: yellowed maps, brittle deeds, handwritten notes with my great-grandfather's neat cursive. Hours passed as I sifted through the past. Then I saw it, a legal document dated 1923, stamped by the county clerk's office. It confirmed ownership of the bridge and the land surrounding it. But tucked behind that document was something even more interesting: a water management easement. I didn't know it then, but that piece of paper would change everything. The next week, I walked into the HOA meeting like a man holding aces in a poker game. The community center smelled like stale coffee and fresh arrogance. Linda sat at the head of the folding table, surrounded by her loyal board members, people who nodded before she even finished speaking. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness, "we appreciate your presence. Do you have anything you'd like to add before we proceed with the vote on your bridge removal?" I laid out my documents like a courtroom lawyer. "Actually, yes. This bridge is legally protected under grandfathered property rights. Built before the HOA existed, maintained by my family for 4 generations. You have no authority to remove it." A murmur rippled through the room. Linda didn't even glance at the papers. She just smiled that same ice-cold smile. "Times change, Mr. Morrison. The law evolves." "Sure," I said. "But history doesn't bend for your bylaws." That earned me a few quiet chuckles from the older neighbors, people who remembered when this lake was still wild. But Linda's allies voted anyway, 5-2 in favor of enforcement. I gathered my papers, nodded once, and walked out without another word. But inside, a storm was brewing. She thought she'd won. She had no idea she'd just handed me the reason to start digging deeper, into laws, into land, and into secrets she'd never want uncovered. You can always tell when someone's afraid of losing power, because that's when they start playing dirty. 3 days after that meeting, the HOA patrol showed up. 2 guys in matching polos, clipboards in hand, and expressions that said they enjoyed their tiny bit of authority. One of them, built like a retired linebacker, called out, "Morning, sir." "Routine compliance check." I sipped my coffee. "At 7 a.m.? On a Sunday?" He didn't answer. Instead, he started reading from his clipboard. "Grass exceeds HOA standard of 3 inches in multiple areas. Dock requires repainting. Mailbox, non-compliant color tone." I actually laughed. "My mailbox is black." He looked up. "Not HOA black, sir." Over the next 2 weeks, they found new violations almost daily. My fishing net was visible from the road. My porch light was too bright. Even my dog's water bowl was improperly placed. Every morning, another citation in the mailbox. Another fine on the record. At first, I thought it was pettiness. Then I found out the truth. Linda's husband, Rick Prescott, owned the security company the HOA was paying to perform compliance checks. $3,000 a month, straight from community funds, right into their family account. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about rules. It was a racket. Sarah tried to stay positive. Just let it go, she said one night at dinner. We'll pay the fines and move on. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle and the legacy. Every petty citation, every letter, every rumor Linda spread through town was another reminder that bullies don't stop when you stay quiet. They stop when you fight smarter. So that's exactly what I planned to do. Because while Linda was busy sending her little clipboard army after me, I'd started researching something much bigger, something that would make her entire empire of rules crumble faster than that bridge she destroyed. One night, while the wind rattled the windows and the lake shimmered under a full moon, I sat surrounded by old maps and legal papers spread across my kitchen table. Coffee had turned cold hours ago, but I barely noticed. Somewhere in that stack of century-old documents was the key to ending this war. I just didn't know what it looked like yet. That's when I found it. A folded, water-stained blueprint labeled Lake Morrison Dam, Secondary Flow Control System, 1923. The edges were brittle, but the ink was still clear. It wasn't just a bridge plan. It was an entire water management design, signed by Samuel Morrison, my great-grandfather. I stared at the blueprint, tracing the lines with my finger. The dam, the spillway, and something else, a series of hidden bypass channels that connected directly beneath where the bridge had stood. My great-grandfather hadn't just built a crossing. He'd built a system that controlled the lake's water level. Suddenly, all the pieces started falling into place. The bridge wasn't just historic, it was functional. And those secondary water rights I'd read about earlier, they weren't ceremonial. They were legal authority to manage the flow of water in and out of the lake. Linda thought she'd erased a relic. What she'd really done was pick a fight with the one person who legally controlled the entire ecosystem her resort depended on. I spent the next few days confirming every detail. County archives, legal databases, even a few calls to an old college professor who specialized in Texas water law. His words hit like a lightning bolt. Jake, if those rights were never transferred to the HOA, they're still yours. You control the dam, not them, control the dam. 3 words that turned the tables completely. I walked down to the lake that evening, the air cool and still. Across the water, I could see the bright lights of Linda's precious resort gleaming like a crown. They'd taken my bridge, mocked my family's history, and used the law like a weapon. But they forgot one thing. I don't just know how to build things, I know how to take them apart. And this time, I had physics, history, and a century of Morrison engineering on my side. The next morning, I stopped thinking like a homeowner and started thinking like an engineer at war. If Linda wanted to play politics, I'd play physics and law. At the same time, I called Patricia Gomez, a water rights attorney out of Austin who had a reputation for making developers cry in courtrooms. When I told her about my family's documents, she went silent for a moment, then said, "Mr. Morrison, do you understand what you have?" "I do now," I said. She laughed softly. "Good, because that means we're not fighting an HOA anymore. We're defending a federal-level water claim." "Send me everything." By the weekend, Patricia had driven up herself to see the lake. We stood near the dam as wind whipped off the water. She pointed toward the resort's new docks. "Their entire business model depends on that water staying level. You could legally open those bypass channels for maintenance tomorrow, and there's nothing they could do about it." I didn't say anything. I just stared across the lake at the resort lights flickering like fireflies. Linda's dreamland built on my family's water. Meanwhile, I called Frank Wilson, the old-timer who'd operated the dam for decades. He was retired, gruff, and skeptical until he saw the blueprint. "I'll be damned," he muttered. "Your granddaddy built redundancy into everything. These bypass valves here, see that? One man can turn the wheel. Whole system drains in hours if needed. I can show you how it works." So we made a plan. Patricia would prepare the paperwork, official notices of maintenance authority, just in case anyone tried to stop us. Frank would teach me the mechanics, and I'd wait for Linda to make her next arrogant move, the one that would justify my routine maintenance. Sarah saw the calm on my face and recognized it for what it was. "You're not mad anymore," she said quietly that night. I nodded. "No, I'm patient. Patience is what breaks dams and bullies." While Linda played her neighborhood power games, I was quietly positioning every piece, legal, mechanical, historical, exactly where I needed them. She thought she was running a board meeting. I was setting up checkmate. The thing about people like Linda is, they mistake silence for surrender. 2 weeks passed without a word from me, and she must have thought she'd won. Then one crisp Monday morning, I woke to the sound of heavy engines again. My stomach dropped. Not this time, I thought. Not again. I threw on my jacket and sprinted down the gravel road. What I saw made my blood boil. A crew of contractors stood at the water's edge, unloading equipment. One of them waved a clipboard in my direction. "We've got orders from the HOA, sir. Bridge debris removal, scheduled for today." "Debris?" I said, my voice low. "You mean my family's history?" Linda's white BMW sat nearby, perfectly polished, reflecting the morning sun like a smug mirror. She stepped out, phone in hand, that same smile plastered across her face. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. Just taking care of community safety concerns." I took a step forward. "You're not authorized to touch that property." She tilted her head. "Actually, we are. Emergency safety resolution passed last night." That's when I noticed something familiar on one of the contractor trucks. Prescott Construction, her husband's company. The same man whose business license had expired months ago. My anger simmered into something colder. Strategy. "Perfect," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Let me grab a picture for the county inspector. They'll love to see unlicensed contractors working under an illegal HOA order." For the first time, her smile faltered. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." That afternoon, Patricia filed an emergency injunction with the county court, attaching photos, invoices, and the expired license. Less than 24 hours later, a sheriff's deputy hand-delivered a restraining order. All demolition activities suspended pending legal review. When I told Linda, she didn't say a word. Just stood there, jaw tight, as the deputy shut her down in front of her crew. I should have felt victory, but I didn't. Not yet. Because I saw something in her eyes that morning. Pure, desperate hatred. And hatred like that doesn't quit. It digs in, festers, and waits for its next chance to strike. She'd fired her last legal shot, which meant the next one would be personal. And I was ready for it. After the injunction, the lake went eerily quiet. No bulldozers, no patrol trucks, no letters in my mailbox. For the first time in months, I could hear the water lapping against the dock again. Soft, steady, patient. But beneath that peace, something darker was brewing. Rumors started spreading like wildfire. The local paper ran a piece calling me a stubborn homeowner blocking community progress. Someone even spray-painted terrorist on my mailbox one night. The next morning, Linda posted a community bulletin claiming my bridge posed environmental risks to the lake. She wasn't fighting me in meetings anymore. She was fighting me in public. Patricia called me that afternoon. "She's setting up a smear campaign, Jake. Stay calm. We're close to turning this around. You have truth and law on your side. She has gossip. But gossip is powerful fuel." By the end of the week, half the neighborhood wouldn't even wave at me. Sarah tried to shield me from it, but I saw the tension in her eyes every time we went into town. "Let them talk," I told her. Words don't scare me. Water listens to physics, not politics. So I kept working quietly with Frank. We oiled the bypass valves, checked the old flow gauges, reviewed every inch of the dam structure like surgeons preparing for an operation, and when we finished, Frank put a hand on my shoulder. "She thinks she's fighting you, son. But what she's really fighting is the man who built this place. Your granddad saw this kind of arrogance coming a century ago. He left you the tools to handle it." That night, standing on my dock, I looked across the lake at the glittering lights of the resort, the symbol of everything Linda worshipped. The water looked calm on the surface, but I knew better, because just beneath that reflection, pressure was building. And when water's ready to move, there's not a lawyer or HOA president alive who can stop it. The morning of the showdown was cold and clear, the kind of morning that makes everything feel sharper, heavier, more real. By 8 a.m., the dam was crawling with people, reporters with cameras, curious neighbors, even a few sheriff's deputies just in case things got out of hand. And, of course, Linda Prescott, pearls gleaming, fury barely hidden behind her practiced smile. She stood flanked by her board members like a general leading a losing army. "Mr. Morrison," she called out, her voice echoing across the concrete. "You're trespassing on community property." I held up a folder, a century's worth of history inside it. Actually, ma'am, I'm standing on federally documented water management infrastructure built by my great-grandfather, and I have the rights to operate it. Patricia stepped forward, handing the sheriff a fresh court order. Federal water rights supersede HOA covenants, she said firmly. He's authorized for maintenance. The deputy nodded once. He's clear to proceed. Linda's smile cracked. You can't. He'll destroy everything we've built. I met her eyes. You destroyed my bridge. This is just maintenance. Then I turned the wheel. The old brass handle groaned like it hadn't been touched in decades. Metal scraped against stone, deep and low, like the earth clearing its throat. Then came the sound, that deep, rolling roar as water began surging through the bypass channels. Within minutes, the lake's surface started to drop. First an inch, then 3, then 6. The resort's pristine boat docks tilted awkwardly, their luxury pontoons sinking into mud. The crowd gasped. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Linda spun toward the sheriff, screaming, "Stop him! Arrest him!" The deputy just shook his head. He's within his rights, ma'am. I gave the wheel one final deliberate turn. 18 inches, Frank murmured beside me. That'll do it. By noon, the resort's grand waterfront looked like a construction site. Mud, cracked earth, and the carcasses of boats stuck halfway between water and land. I closed the valve and stood in silence, feeling the wind off the drained lake brush my face. Linda's voice finally broke through, trembling and small. You ruined everything." I looked at her calmly. "No, Linda, you did. I just reminded the water who it belongs to." The next 48 hours felt unreal. News trucks lined the lake road, and the story spread faster than the water had drained. "Local engineer exposes HOA corruption," the headlines read. Reporters huddled on my porch asking how it felt to take down a $4 million resort. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, calm, like the lake itself after a storm. By the end of the week, investigators uncovered everything Patricia had suspected: misuse of HOA funds, fake invoices, unlicensed contracting, even a secret payment trail between Linda's husband and the board's treasurer. The county called it systemic fraud. The state called it criminal. Linda tried to spin the story, but every lie collapsed under paper evidence. When the sheriff's office froze the HOA's accounts, her empire crumbled overnight. Within a month, she'd resigned for health reasons, though rumor had it she was facing federal charges. Rick lost his contracting license permanently and sold their pristine BMW to cover legal fees. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. The same neighbors who'd once avoided me started showing up at my door. They brought coffee, casseroles, and quiet apologies. One old fisherman said, "Your granddad would have smiled, son. You saved this place." The resort investors approached next, humbler than I'd ever seen them. "Let's rebuild," they said. "The right way this time." And that's exactly what we did, together. We restored the bridge foundations, built a memorial plaque for Samuel Morrison, and created the Morrison Heritage Trail, a public walkway that turned our divided neighborhood into a community again. Linda wanted power and prestige. All I ever wanted was respect for what came before. And in the end, the water gave me that back. Quietly, patiently, and completely. 6 months later, the lake shimmered under the morning sun like nothing had ever happened. Calm, clear, alive again. But everything was different. The old bridge, once reduced to rubble, had been rebuilt stone by stone. Volunteers came from every corner of the county. Engineers, carpenters, even high school kids who'd grown up hearing the story. Together we restored it, not as private property, but as a landmark, a symbol of what happens when people stand up for what matters. We called it the Morrison Bridge Historic District, complete with a bronze plaque honoring my great-grandfather's work. Every time I run my hand over those carved letters, I think about how one man's craftsmanship managed to outlast greed, corruption, and time itself. Sarah and I finally found peace here. We wake up to the sound of birds on the water and laughter echoing from the new walking trail. Families cross the bridge every day now, kids tossing stones, fishermen casting lines, neighbors waving from both sides of the lake. The same community that once turned against me now celebrates what we saved together. And that, more than any legal win, feels like victory. I often find myself standing in the middle of that bridge at sunset, the water glowing beneath me, and I can almost hear my great-grandfather's voice whispering through the breeze. Some things aren't built for profit. They're built to last, and this time, it will. If there's one thing this taught me, it's that legacy isn't just history, it's responsibility. Bullies hide behind rules. Truth hides in the details. So if you're fighting your own HOA nightmare, don't give up. Know your rights, know your history, and tell your story. Drop your HOA horror tale in the comments. I read everyone.